Hello, my name is Gail and I'm just sharing some education and hope with you today. So I attended a webinar called the World Women's Summit, and this lady called Janessa Gans, who was a former CIA officer, was speaking at that summit, and she just fascinated me. So I've done a bit of research on her since, and I just kind of wanted to share what I've learnt, in the hope that, well, it's something new to learn, and B, it might inspire some action or something. So here we go. She is a social, I can't even speak. She is now a social entrepreneur after being a CIA officer, and she founded the Euphrates Institute, which is named after the river, and it's a grassroots peace-building organisation. She was working for 5 years at the CIA, and she did 21 months serving in Iraq from 2003 to 2005. So now, for over a decade, Janessa has provided the vision and leadership to grow the Euphrates Institute into a global network of peace builders and change makers. They have travel study programs to Israel, Palestinian territories, and Jordan. They have a Visionary of the Year program. Janessa herself holds a master's degree in international policy from Stanford University and a bachelor's in international relations from Principal College, where she taught political science. She is a frequent speaker in interfaith community, government, international and educational settings. She has written dozens of articles and been interviewed by major news outlets including CBS, CNN, Los Angeles Times, Christian Science Monitor and Democracy Now! She wants to share her motivations and experiences, emphasising the importance of understanding local populations, the transformative power of nature, and her work on trauma relief project for Palestine. She recounts her time in Iraq, highlighting the barriers between American troops and Iraqis and her efforts to connect with the local people. And she discussed the importance of shifting focus from competition to collective care and global healing. So during her talk, I made some notes so that I could understand better. So she was part of the insurgency of going into Iraq and trying to learn about the so-called enemy, and because how else do you defeat them if you don't understand them? So she wanted to connect to that so-called enemy and to understand them. But this was a male-led war, and their tactics were quite strange, actually. She was kept behind a barricade, and she never had any connection with the Iraqis, so she wasn't able to learn about them, which is quite weird considering that is the basis of insurgency, she says. So basically they were fighting blind and there was lots of ignorance. And she feels that separateness is the world's biggest problem today. So since coming out of the CIA and setting up this institute that she's founded, their sort of policy, their sort of introduction to themselves says that they strive to practice the golden rule locally and globally, which has come to be known as glocally. We believe the world is interconnected and interdependent, and we believe there is a solution to every challenge. We seek to humanise the other, and we get beyond the headlines of despair and highlight the good. We agree with Albert Einstein's sentiment that problems cannot be solved at the same level of thinking that created them. We need to be thinking at a higher level, basically, which I really like. And her story that captivated me, like really blew me away, because she did all this work in the CIA, and ever since she's come out of the CIA and done this, founded this institute, she's done so much work, so much writing, so much shouting, but all it's done is anger people and make them justify their position. So it might be part of a solution, but it's not the solution. So I just want to share her story, and then I want to share a poem that she wrote. So she went to Iraq, and she had a deeply unsettled feeling about how the Americans viewed the Iraqis. They were viewed as the enemy, they were the threat, they were the other. Whilst there, she lived in the Green Zone, a barricaded, protected place. No Iraqis could get in. It was very separate. Separate food and supplies were shipped in. So she had no contact with the community she was there to understand. The tactics the Americans used were very unsettling. She found herself yearning to connect. The basis of insurgency is to understand who you are fighting, yet she couldn't meet them. She begged to tag along on meetings that various people in her group were attending. And these meetings were held on the other side of the barrier, which was good. But she felt so ignorant. And she did sort of feel that they were expected to fight blind, and that it was so illogical, and something felt very wrong with what was happening. She was the only female civilian in the group, and she herself felt like the other. A lot of her troops that were there from the military wondered who she was and why she was there. But she was there because that part of Iraq was her specialty. But anyway, she goes on to tell her story about how an Iraqi group ambushed a US convoy and killed them, mutilated them, and strung up their bodies on a bridge over the Euphrates River. And Euphrates is the name of her institute now because of this. So one of the 4 men that was killed was her brother's friend. And she found the level of barbarianism was shocking. The area was very personal to her. It was her area while she was there. She knew it really well. She'd walked across that bridge. And the fact that it was someone that she personally knew that was killed, it was really emotional while she was there. She suddenly had this feeling of how far have we come that this is what we are doing to each other? The chasm of separation so deep. She felt that this was so wrong and we have to fix it. She reached a major low point at this time. She was putting lots of effort in. She was having no sleep for several weeks at a time, only to discover that the work that they were doing was having the opposite effect to what they wanted it to affect. She stood by that same river, exhausted and stuck in recovery mode. And suddenly she kind of had an epiphany. It was a sunset, and she suddenly noticed all the colours of pink and orange and light blue and purple in the sky. And there was silence. And she goes on to say, no one tells you about the sound of war, the deafening explosions. The noise obliterates you from within and you feel like you're going to explode. Yet, she stood by this river. Utter stillness. She could hear the chirping of the birds, the swaying of the trees, and the sound of the river. There was no human interference in that scene. beauty, peace, stillness. River flowing by, and a few miles downstream was where the war zone was. Nothing affected the trajectory of that river. The river was more powerful, undisturbed, more subtle, quieter, easily unseen, but nothing could stop it. There's a lot of masculine energy in the world today, and there's a lot of the wars are masculine in their nature. They're very seen, full of bluster, might, in your face, material strength and power. But this river represented feminine energy. It was so much deeper. It was a life force. And she stood and she watched the river. And this voice that she doesn't know where it came from, whether it was God or the river or whatever, just said, "Which will you choose?" And she just replied back, "I choose the river." She needed hope, and the river provided her with a promise and a choice. And I was totally blown away by that story, and it's very poignant. And since coming out of the CIA and founding this institute to help with all these projects to create connectiveness with various communities, you know, she's probably hit another sort of rock bottom, really, with maybe her attempts feel quite futile, like we're still having wars all over the place. So this was a poem that she wrote through tears at 4 a.m. when she couldn't sleep, and I really love it. It goes like this: "Everybody is hurting, but you started it. We could debate that answer for 1,000 years. Everybody's hurting, but we're hurting more than you. Why compete over pain? Everybody's hurting, but our lives are worth more than yours. A human being is a human being. Everybody's hurting, but you want to destroy me. Someday we'll see that destroying you destroys me. Everybody's hurting." And I just wanted to kind of use my little British voice to sort of voice her words and her work just a little bit. Because if I inspire a listener to do their own Googling and their own research and their own learning and their own donating to institutes like hers, then, you know, it's all about planting seeds in people's heads and watching them grow, isn't it? Which I'm very much a fan of. So thank you for listening, and, you know, what is it you choose?